First contact and invasion. The Vorcidian Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade alone. Their massive biomechanical vessels moved through space like predators, leaving nothing but subjugated worlds in their wake. To the species that made up the empire, conquest wasn't just a mission. It was an evolutionary imperative. Their civilization had outgrown its home system millennia ago, and the only way forward was to take what others had. Their bodies, evolved in the harsh radiation of their twin suns, had made them physically superior to most species they encountered. Their technology, harvested from dozens of conquered civilizations, gave them an insurmountable advantage. Or so they believed. When the Vorcidian scout ships first detected Earth, it was classified as a Category 3 world, technologically capable but militarily insignificant. The Vorcidian High Command expected the conquest to last no more than a standard lunar cycle. The planet was resource-rich, positioned at an advantageous stellar junction, and inhabited by a relatively young species that had barely ventured beyond its own moon. It was perfect. Admiral Krelfor, commander of the Vorcidian 7th Fleet, stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Inevitable Dominion. His scaled skin reflected the blue light of Earth as it appeared on the main view screen. 6 fingers tapped rhythmically against the control console as he studied the planet. "Begin standard conquest protocol," he ordered, his dual-tone voice echoing through the chamber. "Send the preliminary communication. Give them the opportunity to surrender." The communications officer nodded, her cranial ridges pulsing with bioluminescence as she worked. "Message sent. Admiral. Awaiting response." In the United Nations Space Command Headquarters beneath Geneva, General Diana Martinez stared at the message that had appeared on every communication device across the planet simultaneously. The translation matrix had worked quickly, converting the alien language into text that humans could understand. The message was brief and direct. "To the governing bodies of Earth, your world has been selected for integration into the Vorcidian Empire. Surrender your military capabilities and prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in planetary sterilization. You have 24 Earth hours to comply." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Diplomats argued for negotiation. Military leaders demanded immediate mobilization. Representatives from every nation spoke over one another, fear and anger mingling in equal measure. General Martinez raised her hand, silencing the room. "We need to respond, but first we need to understand what we're dealing with. Dr. Chen, what can you tell us about these Vorcidians?" Dr. Maya Chen, head of xenobiology for the USC, stepped forward. At 43, she had spent her career studying theoretical alien biology, never expecting to apply her knowledge to an actual first contact scenario, certainly not one that began with a threat. "Based on the limited data we've gathered from their transmission, they appear to be a reptilian species with significant biomechanical augmentation," she explained, bringing up grainy images captured from the message. "Their ships are massive. The flagship alone is approximately 3 kilometers in length. Their technology is far beyond ours, but there's something interesting about their biology." She highlighted a section of the alien commander's exposed skin. "See these patterns. These suggest a unique cellular structure that might be vulnerable to specific environmental factors. I need more data, but there might be something we can use here." General Martinez nodded grimly. "Work fast, Doctor. In the meantime, we need to buy time." She turned to the communications officer. "Send this response. We request a diplomatic meeting to discuss terms of cultural exchange and potential cooperation. We are a peaceful species interested in galactic stability." The message was sent, but the response came almost immediately. "Negotiations are not required. Prepare for integration or extinction." Moments later, the first Vorcidian warships entered Earth's atmosphere. They bypassed military installations, instead positioning themselves above major population centers. When they fired, it wasn't with conventional weapons, but with massive gravitational pulses that collapsed buildings and infrastructure, causing minimal environmental damage, but maximum human casualties. Cities worldwide were struck simultaneously. New York, Beijing, Moscow, London, Tokyo, all suffered devastating first strikes. Millions died in the initial attack as buildings crumbled and transportation networks failed. Earth's military forces scrambled to respond, but conventional weapons proved ineffective against the Vorcidian shields. Fighter jets and missile systems were swatted away like insects. Nuclear deterrents were neutralized before they could launch. Within hours, Earth's formal military structure was in disarray, and the Vorcidian ground forces began to land. The aliens emerged from their transports, towering 2 meters tall with armored exoskeletons that seemed to shift and adapt to Earth's environment. Their weapons fired energy pulses that disintegrated human soldiers instantly. It seemed hopeless. But humanity had one advantage the Vorcidians hadn't counted on. They had experienced near-extinction events before. From prehistoric climate shifts to modern pandemics, humans had evolved to survive against impossible odds, and they refused to go quietly. As formal resistance crumbled, guerrilla networks formed spontaneously. Military survivors banded together with civilians. Communication systems, built with redundancies after the cyber wars of the 2030s, remained partially functional despite alien attempts to disable them. Human resistance was disorganized but persistent, like a colony of ants defending against a boot, individually weak but collectively resilient. Dr. Maya Chen worked tirelessly in a makeshift laboratory beneath the ruins of Geneva. The UNSC headquarters had been among the first targets, but its underground facilities remained partially intact. She had collected samples from fallen Vorcidian soldiers, studying their biology with increasing fascination. "This is remarkable," she muttered, peering through a microscope at alien tissue. Their cellular structure incorporates both organic and synthetic components, but the organic base has a critical vulnerability. The cell walls of Vorcidian biology contain trace amounts of a mineral unique to their home world, a mineral that became highly unstable when exposed to a specific frequency of electromagnetic radiation. It was a quirk of evolution, a small price to pay for the otherwise tremendous advantages their biology provided. On their home world, this frequency didn't naturally occur. On Earth, it could be artificially generated. "General," Dr. Chen called out, her voice echoing through the damaged facility. "I think I found something we can use." General Martinez limped over, her arm bandaged from a recent skirmish. "Tell me you have good news, Doctor." Their bodies are vulnerable to a specific electromagnetic frequency. It disrupts their cellular cohesion, essentially causes their cells to break down. We could develop a weapon that targets this vulnerability. How long would it take? To develop a prototype? A week, maybe 2. To manufacture enough to make a difference? Longer. Martinez grimaced. "We don't have longer, Doctor. The Vorcidians have established control over most major cities. They're beginning to implement their integration process, forcing humans into labor camps, harvesting resources, dismantling our infrastructure to build their own." As if to punctuate her point, the facility shook as another gravitational pulse struck nearby. Dust fell from the ceiling. "Then we'll have to be clever about deployment," Dr. Chen replied, determination hardening her features. "We don't need to hit every Vorcidian, just enough to disrupt their command structure. If we can target their leadership, especially Admiral Krelvor, we might be able to force a retreat. How do you propose we get close enough? Their flagship never lands, and their personal shields make assassination impossible." Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with a dangerous idea. "They're taking human prisoners to their ships for experimentation. What if we let them capture us?" Martinez stared at the scientist for a long moment before a slow, grim smile spread across her face. "That's either brilliant or suicidal. In my experience, General, those often amount to the same thing when humanity's back is against the wall." As they began to formulate their desperate plan, resistance cells across the planet continued to fight. In the ruins of Manhattan, survivors ambushed Vorcidian patrols. In the mountains of Switzerland, former military engineers repurposed civilian technology into makeshift weapons. In the deserts of Australia, indigenous trackers guided guerrilla fighters through terrain the aliens couldn't navigate. The Vorcidians had expected surrender. What they got was a species that simply refused to accept defeat. Admiral Krill Vor stared at the casualty reports with growing irritation. The humans were proving unexpectedly troublesome. While their resistance had no realistic chance of victory, their persistent attacks were slowing the integration process. Resources that should have been dedicated to establishing permanent Vorcidian outposts were instead being diverted to security operations. Increase harvesting operations, he commanded. Double the labor quotas. Break their will through exhaustion if necessary. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vextal, shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, our field commanders report that humans seem to fight harder when their kin are threatened. Perhaps a different approach. Are you questioning conquest protocol, Sub-Commander? Krulvor's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. No, Admiral. I merely suggest tactical adaptation based on local conditions. The protocol has worked on 17 worlds. It will work here. Increase pressure on the human population. They will break. But as the Vorcidian forces tightened their grip, humanity's resistance only grew more determined. And in the underground laboratory, Dr. Maya Chen was about to complete a prototype that would change everything. The counterattack. Commander James Jackson had seen enough death to last several lifetimes. Before the invasion, he had led special operations for the United States Navy. Now, he led a multinational team of survivors dedicated to a single mission, getting Dr. Maya Chen and her prototype weapon onto the Vorcidian flagship. This is insanity, he muttered, examining the small device Chen had created. It looked innocuous, just a metal cylinder about the size of a soda can with a simple activation switch. You're sure this will work? In theory, Dr. Chen replied, carefully placing the device in a shielded container. The frequency generator will disrupt their cellular structure, causing a cascading breakdown. Range is limited, about 50 meters, but if we can activate it near the ship's command center, it should affect enough of their leadership to create chaos. In theory, Jackson repeated skeptically. And your plan to get us captured relies on them taking us to the flagship rather than killing us outright. Based on intercepted communications, they're specifically looking for human scientists and military leaders for interrogation. Their interrogation happens on the flagship. General Martinez, who had been listening silently, spoke up. It's a risk, but it's the best shot we have. The Vorcidians are expanding their labor camps. Within months, they'll have stripped Earth of its resources and either eliminated or enslaved most of humanity. Jackson nodded grimly. Then we better get captured by the right patrol. When do we move? Tomorrow at dawn, Martins answered. We have intelligence that a Vorcidian science division will be sweeping this area for human technology. They'll be looking for prisoners who can explain our systems. The night passed in tense silence as the team made final preparations. The device was carefully hidden in a modified subdermal implant in Dr. Chen's arm, a location the alien scanners might miss. Commander Jackson and his team of 5 operators memorized the known layout of the Vorcidian flagship based on intel gathered from resistance fighters worldwide. As dawn broke, they heard the distinctive hum of Vorcidian transports approaching. The plan was in motion. The capture went exactly as anticipated, almost too perfectly. The Vorcidian science team identified Dr. Chen as a high-value target immediately, especially after she accidentally revealed her knowledge of xenobiology. Commander Jackson and 2 of his operators were taken as additional subjects. The other 3 were left behind, presumably for processing into labor camps. The transport ship ascended rapidly through Earth's atmosphere. Through a small viewport, Chen watched her home planet grow distant, the devastation of the invasion visible even from space. Massive Vorcidian ships hovered over what had once been thriving cities, now reduced to extraction points for resources and human labor. "They're going to pay for this," Jackson whispered, his voice barely audible. Chen nodded slightly, conscious of the alien guards watching them. Focus on the mission. The flagship was even more massive than it had appeared from Earth. The transport ship entered a docking bay large enough to contain several aircraft carriers. Inside, the human prisoners saw their first glimpse of Vorcidian society. Not just soldiers, but engineers, scientists, and what appeared to be civilian administrators. The Empire was a complete civilization, not just a military force. They were separated upon arrival. Dr. Chen was taken to what appeared to be a scientific facility, while Jackson and his men were directed toward what they assumed were interrogation chambers. This wasn't part of the plan. They needed to stay together to coordinate the attack. Jackson caught Chen's eye as they were being led away. He gave an almost imperceptible nod toward a ventilation shaft they had passed. Their backup plan, if separated, attempt to reach the ship's environmental control system. It wasn't ideal, but it might allow them to disperse the electromagnetic frequency throughout a significant portion of the ship. Dr. Chen found herself in a laboratory filled with alien technology. A Vorcidian scientist approached, its scaled face expressionless. "You will assist in analyzing human biological compatibility with our systems," it stated in strangely accented English. "Cooperation will result in preferential treatment." Chen feigned meek acceptance, using the opportunity to study Vorcidian technology up close. Their biomechanical interfaces were centuries beyond human capability, but she noticed a critical design element. Their systems were calibrated to their specific biology. This gave her an idea. Meanwhile, Jackson and his team were experiencing significantly less pleasant accommodations. The interrogation was brutal, but not immediately fatal. The Vorcidians wanted information about Earth's remaining military capabilities and resistance networks. The humans continued to resist despite obvious defeat, the interrogator stated, circling Jackson. "Explain this irrational behavior." Jackson, despite the pain, managed a smile. "That's the thing you don't understand about us. Humans don't accept obvious defeat. It's not in our nature. Your nature will be adjusted during integration. Good luck with that." Hours passed. Through careful observation and measured cooperation, Dr. Chen gained limited access to a Vorcidian terminal. While appearing to input data about human biology, she surreptitiously accessed the ship's layout. The command center was 20 levels above, heavily guarded and practically inaccessible. The environmental control system, however, was just 2 levels below her current position. She needed to act. The implant in her arm was beginning to cause discomfort. The human-made technology wasn't designed for extended subdermal use. If it malfunctioned before deployment, their mission would fail. Using knowledge gleaned from studying the Vorcidians, Chen manipulated the laboratory's containment protocols, triggering an alarm that indicated potential biological contamination. In the ensuing confusion, she slipped away, navigating through service corridors toward the environmental control system. Jackson, meanwhile, had executed his own escape. Years of special operations training had taught him to turn pain into focus. When the guards momentarily lowered the containment field to administer what they called compliance therapy, he struck with precision, incapacitating 2 guards and freeing his teammates. "Find Chen," he ordered as they armed themselves with Vorcidian weapons. "Head for environmental control." Alarms blared throughout the massive ship as both humans converged on their target. Vorcidian security forces mobilized, but the ship's design worked against them. Compartmentalized sections, meant to contain breaches, now hampered their response. Dr. Chen reached the environmental control room first, quickly assessing the alien technology. The system was immense, regulating atmosphere, temperature, and radiation levels throughout the flagship. If she could interface her device with the main distribution node, the electromagnetic frequency could potentially reach every corner of the ship. She carefully extracted the device from her arm, wincing as the makeshift implant left a small wound. As she worked to connect it to the Vorcidian system, the door to the control room slid open. She spun, expecting Vorcidian guards, but instead saw Jackson and one remaining team member. The other had fallen during their escape. "Tell me you can make this work," Jackson said, setting up a defensive position at the entrance. "I think so," Chen replied, focusing on the interface. "Their technology is compatible with the frequency generator, but I need to modify the distribution parameters. Give me 3 minutes." "We might not have that long." Jackson's stolen weapon hummed as it charged. "Company's coming." The first Vorcidian security team arrived seconds later, energy weapons firing. Jackson and his teammate returned fire, the narrow corridor becoming a kill zone. The air filled with the scent of ozone and burning matter. In the command center, Admiral Krelvor received reports of the human escape with growing rage. These primitives had somehow penetrated his flagship, evaded capture, and were now threatening sensitive systems. It was unprecedented. "Lock down all environmental systems," he ordered. "Depressurize the section if necessary." "Admiral," his second-in-command warned, "depressurization will affect our own personnel in that section." Acceptable losses. These humans must not be allowed to interfere with ship operations. In the environmental control room, Dr. Chen worked frantically as warning lights indicated the imminent lockdown. "They're trying to cut off access," she called to Jackson. "Once the system locks, I won't be able to complete the interface." "How much longer?" 90 seconds, maybe less." Jackson grimaced as energy fire grazed his shoulder. "We'll hold them off. Just finish it." The Vorcidian forces pressed forward, their superior numbers beginning to tell. Jackson's teammate fell, chest scorched by an energy pulse. Jackson retreated into the control room, sealing the door behind him, but it wouldn't hold for long. "Almost there," Chen muttered, fingers flying over the alien interface. The device hummed as it synchronized with the ship's systems. "I just need tow." The ship suddenly lurched, throwing them both off balance. Emergency lights flashed as the section began to depressurize. "They're venting the atmosphere," Jackson shouted, grabbing onto a console to steady himself. "We're out of time." Chen made a final adjustment and slammed her hand down on the activation switch. Done. The device pulsed once, then integrated fully with the ship's systems. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, throughout the flagship, Vorcidians began to stagger and collapse as the precisely calibrated electromagnetic frequency disrupted their cellular structure. The effect wasn't immediately fatal, but intensely debilitating, like a human experiencing sudden extreme radiation poisoning. On the command deck, Admiral Krelvor felt it first, a strange tingling that rapidly escalated to excruciating pain. He watched in horror as his officers collapsed around him, their biomechanical implants malfunctioning as their bodies began to break down. "What is happening?" he demanded, though there was no one left conscious to answer. With failing strength, he activated the emergency protocol, a signal to the fleet to initiate tactical withdrawal in the event of catastrophic command failure. Throughout Earth orbit, Vorcidian ships began to disengage, retreating from the planet they had been so confident of conquering. Ground forces, suddenly without leadership and suffering from the same mysterious ailment that struck their commanders, fell into disarray. In the environmental control room, Jackson and Chen fought to survive as the atmosphere thinned. The section was nearly vacuum when emergency protocols finally re-engage, restoring life support. The Vorcidian programming, designed to protect the ship at all costs, had overridden the Admiral's depressurization order when it detected widespread crew incapacitation. Did it work? Jackson gasped as air flooded back into the room. Chen, checking the system readouts, nodded weakly. "The frequency is propagating throughout the ship. And..." She pointed to a status display showing Vorcidian ships breaking orbit. "It looks like they're leaving." They had won, but the victory was far from complete. Earth lay devastated, its population decimated, its cities in ruins. The Vorcidian Empire had been driven back, but not destroyed. Recovery would take decades, perhaps centuries. Yet as news of the Vorcidian retreat spread across the battered planet, something remarkable happened. Humans emerged from hiding. from resistance cells, from labor camps. They looked up at the sky where alien ships had once darkened the horizon and saw only stars. The Vorcidian Empire had ruled countless worlds, had believed itself unstoppable. But they had never encountered a species like humanity before, a species that refused to accept defeat, that found strength in adversity, that would sacrifice everything to remain free. In the aftermath, as Earth began the long process of rebuilding, the Vorcidian technology left behind provided a pathway to advancement that might otherwise have taken centuries. Humanity adapted and incorporated alien science into their own, creating hybrid technologies that surpassed even what the Vorcidians had achieved. Within a generation, human ships ventured beyond their solar system for the first time, stronger and more prepared for what awaited them in the vastness of space. They carried with them the lesson learned from Earth's darkest hour, that the most dangerous species in the galaxy wasn't the one with the most advanced technology or the strongest bodies. It was the one that simply refused to be conquered. And somewhere in the distant reaches of space, what remained of the once mighty Vorcidian Empire prepared for the day when humanity would find them.